All right, I'm Al Margolis. I've got three things. I'm going to do a 30-second demo or not, and then show a little bit of software, and then later on, if there's time and interest, I've got the source code to step through. This little demo, if it works, is written in robot assembly language, also known as Python. And this is my first step towards the Floorbot challenge. We were talking about this at the SV Ross meeting. The idea is to just go hit a wall and back up. And this, at home, it was doing that. So we'll see if it does it here. Okay. Also, so
do it again. I didn't get a picture, man. Yeah, hang on a second. Wait. Let's get a video.
I'm more of a speed guy, can't.
All right. So disappointing. Go ahead.
Okay. A couple months ago, I gave a little bit of a talk about what I was doing with my, crazy kind of building my own system, going all sorts of different ways. One of the challenges is OpenCV, and I don't think I demoed this before, and it's gotten a lot better. Part of what I'm doing is I'm building an entire platform that is trying to be device independent. So partially what I'm going to demo is this software. I'm going to be using my MacBook camera, but if I had my robot with the camera on it, I could be doing this live from my camera as it wanders around. If you play with OpenCV, it's hard to understand what to play with. And they try this, and you save JPEGs, look at it. And so this is a visualizer for OpenCV. So what I'm going to do, come over here, pick my source, which is going to be local, so you can look at my ugly face here. You'll notice my complexion's a little bit weird because there's RGB versus BGR in OpenCV, and it's hard to tell exactly what is right. OpenCV is just a whole family of different functions, and then if you go Googling, you'll find professors who have published compound functions, and they all have parameters. None of that is clearly explained. And one of the things I recently discovered, my son, who understands the math and actually reads the documentation, pointed out a function that is always in entity detection shouldn't be there because it's actually built into one of the other functions. And I've discovered that's done wrong all the way through the OpenCV documentation, not to mention every website you look at, and it actually hurts the effectiveness of canning. So there's a live image. I'm going to hit my plus here to bring up another filter, and that just did the black and white conversion filter. I'm going to bring up another one, and I'm going to bring up blur. And that's not blur. There's blur. So I'm slightly blurred there, and you'll see it brought up the parameter, which is a kernel size of blurring. And so I'm going to change that to 11 by 11. And I am now more blurred. And you can play with different parameters for different projects. Pardon me? Well, even that's why it's so blurred.
It's a lot of 11s.
But yeah, it's a lot. It doesn't matter. It turns out you don't want blur for what I'm going to be doing here anyway, even though you'll find it, like I say, all over the internet. What I'm going to do instead is go straight to canny, which starts to look for lines. And after canny, I'm going to do find contours. And you see the red lines is starting to find the entities.
Al, the previous one was the contrast detection. And then you moved to
the sequence is image to black and white,
Yep.
to canny, to contours.
Okay.
And what you'll find everywhere in examples is they do an extra blur in there. And in my testing, that reduces the entities that you discover. So it actually hurts the process, even though all the examples, including at OpenCV.org. And what we're seeing here is live, and I can play, add and delete steps. And my next, what I will soon be able to do is, okay, that's a nice process, hit a button, and it'll feed it to my robot, and it will use that for its entity detection as it drives around. So if there are questions, otherwise I'm going to call that for this. If there's time, I can go through the Python code if there's interest.
Just curious, what is the blur function useful for?
Sometimes there's too much detail. When you're, and that's part of why people want to use it. I had this situation, the robot's down on the floor, and I have this very bumpy carpet in my living room. And it was detecting the sides of those bumps as entities. And so my close field was just full of these tiny little entities that you then had to sort out to figure out where the line or whatever you're trying to detect is. Blurring seems to fix that, but it turns out it's not the right approach. And part of it, if you go reading, each one of these, I used to have a lot of this hard-coded. Now each one of these filters and all of its parameters and options is in, right now it's in their classes. And eventually I'm going to have a plugin where you can create just create a module, throw in a directory, and it'll add that filter to the system so you can play with it. And you can play with the parameters to learn what they actually do. If you understand the math, that's probably the best way to do it. If you can visualize from the math, I've got a son who can do that. It's just totally worthless to me, but I can explore, and this lets me explore. Yes?
Is that k-means clustering?
Pardon me?
Is k-means clustering an option?
I'm not familiar with that. I could anything if it's OpenCV code, I could add that with just a couple lines.
OpenCV does support k-means clustering.
It's basically this is my tool for me to help me with the applications I'm working on. I'm thinking of open source. I don't know what to do with this.
Is this your this front end is your code?
Yeah, it's turned into, I started to build a robot to follow lines, and I'm building what's more and more looking like an alternative to ROS. And part of what you're looking at here was a 3-day sidetrack. I needed a GUI. I decided I didn't want to use Qt because of licensing, so I started using TK, which just is powerful but very verbose, difficult to use thing. So I built my own wrapper around TK. So this whole interface, using my easy TK is like 20 lines of code to build tabs and forms and all of that.
Somebody's just been promoting, they've come up with an OpenCV, a GUI for OpenCV written in OpenCV. That's open source, and it's just a set of header files that let you do windows and tabs, and it's all just written on top of OpenCV.
You can do that. If you go to Git and look for boutique engineering, you'll see the thing I did that's all OpenCV to play with warp perspective, and you've got sliders and all of that.
But somebody has actually just announced and released a whole package that does full GUI, and it's portable because it just uses OpenCV.
Now you're telling me.
Doesn't rely on
Well, the thing that won't do is this feeds into my robot system. So, like I say, I don't know everything. It's impossible. I'm just coding. Anything else?
Can you talk a little about DIY Robocar?
Sure. A meetup group. If you Google DIY Robocars, There is a meet.org, .something.com, is a group that meets about once a month over in Oakland. Somehow they got access to about 100,000 square foot warehouse. And inside they have 2 tracks painted. One is kind of freeway style, white lines with a dashed center line. It's about, I think, 40 meters by 20 meters, you know, kind of a Grand Prix sort of track. And the idea is to build small cars, you know, this-ish side, that can autonomously navigate the course with, you know, the objective to eventually scale up to, you know, full-size cars within the group. There are more or less most of the people are using this Donkey platform, which is something one of the founders put together, which is a deep learning, I think is a proper terminology. So they, you know, they drive their car around the track with the camera, collecting all this video. They upload to AWS, run some magic through TensorFlow, download a model, and then the car tries to drive that. I think Marco has a custom derivative of Donkey. You know, there are some people doing really dumb pit-type controls, look for the line and follow the line tightly. There's another group of people, there's a thing called OpenMV, which is a video camera running MicroPython. And actually, the main software developer for that platform is now competing over in Oakland. And the founder of the group is Chris Anderson, who is 3D Robotics, who developed ArduPilot, which is what almost all drones run. So it's a really powerful group. And the next meeting is August 12th. The last one, I would say there were like 100 people altogether, 50 people there looking, trying to figure out if they're going to get into it, and maybe 10 or 15 cars running. And it's been growing every month. So on meetup.com, look for DIY Robocars.
Thank you very much.